quarter of the population been raped or has experienced rape. Even more troubling is that, well, it's not, generally speaking, just rape that occurs. There's generally violence as well. It's bad enough to be violated in such a way, but no, you're also physically abused at the same time. So roughly about 10% of adolescents experience date violence. And that's per year. Which means that by the time you enter college, roughly about 65% have experienced some type of date violence. That's 2/3 of American college students have experienced some type of date violence. So, given that 2/3 of college students have experienced some sort of rape violence, they have a large pool of people to ask, poll, to find out, well, why did these things happen? So they actually interviewed men who had perpetrated date violence or date rape upon others, what some of the factors in their lives were. And they found some interesting combinations, some things that stayed the same. The first was that more often, if they were inebriated or intoxicated, a man was more likely to be violent on a date or to force himself on a woman. If the man had a history of family violence, if he was abused or saw his father or mother abusing others, he was more likely to abuse himself.
Shouldn't we oppose it, though? Someone who was suffering.
In a perfect world, yes. We would hope that
right.
Someone who would have that would never let someone else experience the same thing.
So just like the one that happened to the child.
You've got to take into consideration that most of these folks, this is what they know, and this is all they know, because children of family violence and strict homes and stuff like that don't get to get out and socialize that often usually.
It's an easy thing to say, I'm never going to do that to someone else because it happened to me. It's a far harder thing to actually put it into practice. And then finally, gender stereotypes. Men who conformed to gender stereotypes were more likely to abuse women who conformed to gender stereotypes. Yeah, so men who were very masculine were more likely to abuse, rape, be violent if a woman was more feminine. Because they said that they had basically been taught that the woman was supposed to submit to the man's desires and wishes.
I was wondering where the submissive was from.
So you've got a man who is overly aggressive, or not overly, but naturally aggressive, because he's conforming to that masculine stereotype that men should be aggressive and dominant, and a woman who is naturally submissive. Well, if you pair them together, it's not a guarantee. I'm not saying if you've got a boyfriend who's masculine, get away from him. No, that's not the case. But generally speaking, the people who did perpetrate these acts, they did have a shared common gender stereotype. They conformed to what they believed to be how a man or a woman should act. Now that we're kind of down, let's try to go somewhere else for a second. Well, teenage years, 18, 19, tends to be the time where most people start getting jobs. Well, the process of getting a job actually happens much earlier than that. So this is Ssris' career development. He says it happens in 3 stages. The first stage, he says, happens about age 14 or so. This is the stage of crystallization. Now, at this stage, Ssris says that we use our identity to try to identify possible careers. So we form that identity from earlier, and we see that, I'm really good at cooking. I should get a job in cooking. Or, I'm really good in sales. I should look for a job in sales. I'm very open with people. I can communicate very easily. This would work for me. So just kind of exploring the options. And it says by the age of 18, we enter specification. This is where a person will identify specific interests in jobs to help them to obtain appropriate training. So, if a person was interested in sales, okay, well, sales is huge. Are you selling tires? Are you selling clothes? Are you selling makeup? Are you selling food? Which one of those works for you? Is it something completely different? It says that a person will start to specify their particular jobs which resonate with them, which they would say, yeah, I can do that. That sounds good. And then finally, by about age 20, they enter implementation. This is where they actually enter the workforce. They obtain one of these jobs.
So here, when you're grown up already working, right?
Sorry?
In the implementation phase, it should be when a person is already grown up and is working. Is it what it is?
Generally speaking, you can have people who are working at age 15.
That's
You
right.
can have people
That's
who are
right, yeah.
who totally bug this and they're in the implementation
Yeah.
phase much earlier. Just generally speaking, this is about how it forms. So we've looked at forming an identity. And having an identity is very important because it starts to establish our personality. Personality takes a very long time to form. It takes a very long time to change should it form badly. Some of the worst and hardest disorders to work with as a psychologist are personality disorders because a person has had 20 to 30 years with this particular style of thinking. Well, if they've had 20 or 30 years in that style, you can expect 20 to 30 years of working with them to try to unlearn that style.
So we take that long.
Yeah, personality disorders are pretty much lifetime disorders.
So there's no hope for half
Pretty much. Well, there's hope. It takes a lot of time.
I didn't say help. I said hope.
Yeah.
Plenty of help, no hope.
So, now we're going to look at Holland's personality type theory. Now, Holland said that a person will find a job which reflects their own personal views, what they view as important. A job that fits their personality. Now, this creates an interesting dilemma. When you enter a job that is in the field that you like, that resonates with you, you have very high intrinsic motivation. You have a want, a desire. You like this job. You want to do good at it. Do well, excuse me. But what we see happens is that as you perform a job, well, you're not performing a job for no reason, right? You get paid. Well, when someone pays you to do something, that's an extrinsic motivator. And this creates cognitive dissonance. You say, hey, I really like doing this job. I'm very highly intrinsically motivated. But someone else is paying me to do this job. And you only pay someone to do things that nobody else likes doing. So maybe I don't enjoy this job as much as I thought I did. And you start to be less intrinsically motivated about something that originally you were very interested in. Now, it's not going to make your intrinsic motivation cancel out, but what you'll find is that over time, you enjoy the job less when the reality of it sets in. Now, Holland said that there were many different personality types that fit with certain jobs. The first is the realistic. Now, realistics, they're very good with physical labor, working with their hands, real-world solutions, manipulation. And so, people who are very highly realistic tend to gravitate towards jobs in construction, architecture, mechanics. Next, for the investigative. These are people who are very task-oriented and very good with abstract thinking skills. So people with this particular personality type did best in jobs like investigation, police work, scientists for study. There's the social. This personality type is very good with verbal skills, relating to others, and with relationships. So the people here would tend to gravitate towards teaching or social workers, counselors. There's the conventional, which seek out very defined tasks. They need structure. But they have very good verbal skills. And generally, these people will gravitate towards jobs in management, sales, clerks, where they know what they're going to have to do day in and day out. There's enterprising. This particular personality type is very high in verbal skills. They enjoy I'm not enterprising. They have very high verbal skills, very concerned with status and power. And you'll see that they are very entrepreneurial. So these are things like store managers, directors, people in control, making money. And finally, there's the artistic. And these people this personality type is very good at expressing themselves and very good at unstructured tasks. So they don't need someone to tell them, here's what you have to do today. So, okay, so whatever. I'm all right. I can handle this. people that are high in this personality type tend to gravitate towards the arts, music. Check page 341. It's a very nice graph on this. Alright. So, teenage years, we tend to enter the workforce. However, we're also in school most of the time, which means we're limited to part-time work. Now, part-time employment is very good to get some money to put towards some things. However, the idea that if we're teaching the value of $1 actually falls on its face. How many teenagers do you know that actually put things aside and store them? Yeah. We tend, usually at this age, as soon as we get the money, we have a use for it. So, there is a growing number of students who are taking part-time jobs. That's okay. It does have some costs, though, and that's that overall you have less time to study. Less time to devote to other things. So, if you have a part-time job, and you're going to school, and you have some things that you'd like to do on the weekends, you've got to be very good at managing your time. So having good time management skills and stress reduction techniques are very important. Generally speaking, people who have a part-time job, they tend to perform at a lower level than people who don't. And again, well, because you're having less time overall to study. You're having to cram your study sessions in whenever you can. They're also more likely to abuse drugs. But there are some benefits as well. And that's that people who have a part-time job in their teen years, when they're entering college, well, they tend to be less stressed when they get out of college and they enter the workforce full-time than people who didn't have a part-time job. The last little bit we have to talk about are the 3 Ds of adolescence. Now, the first D that we're going to talk about is drugs. Adolescence is generally when most of us experiment with drugs.
What is 3D?
Huh?
Sorry. What does 3D stands for? Adolescence and 3D.
Mm-hmm.
What's...
3D is 3 dimensions.
Okay.
Well, it stands for the 3 factors.
Okay.
The first is drugs. So, what's the most common drug that people experience or experiment with in adolescence? Yeah, absolutely. Alcohol.
Cigarettes.
Roughly about 73% of all college students, incoming college students, have experience with alcohol. And it's definitely the most used. Now, alcohol is a barbiturate and a soporific, which means it makes you tired, puts you down, makes you feel a little depressed. Now, it inhibits the endocrine system. That's how it makes you depressed. It also impairs your memory and higher brain functions. And generally speaking, students who have parents who drink tend to experiment with drinks earlier themselves. It's only natural. You're around it. They also tend to show an inability to handle stress. They tend to have more stressful lives than others. Number 2 is nicotine. Now, roughly half of incoming college students have tried nicotine in some form, most often smoking, but there's also chew and dip and snuff, which thankfully we're seeing that less and less. Now, nicotine is a stimulant. This increases dopamine production. Dopamine is very important. It makes you happy. But dopamine needs to be strictly regulated. Too much dopamine in your system, and you start to lose control of your nerve impulses. People with Parkinson's, they have an excess of dopamine in their system. Now, nicotine is also closely related with cancers, leukemia, pneumonia. People tend to lose sensation, especially in their extremities. And later on, even though this is a stimulant, they start to have increased levels of depression. Why? Because it takes more and more nicotine to feel good. You become more tolerant of it. What we see is that the level of nicotine use has actually dropped over the years. And that's due mainly to education programs and peer programs to try to make people a little more aware of what it can do to you.
And the fact that you can't just smoke anywhere or fit anywhere.
Absolutely.
Or
Yeah, we're having more laws put against it. And finally, there's marijuana, which is a little more than a third of the incoming student population. It's a cannabinoid. It's most often known as the gateway drug, which is actually a misnomer. Yeah, people who use marijuana are more likely to experiment with harder drugs. That is true. But people who experiment with nicotine are more likely to experience harder drugs. People who experiment with alcohol are more likely to experiment with harder drugs. The only difference, well, these two are legal, depending on your age. And this one's illegal no matter what. So, really, just about any drug could be considered a gateway drug. Now, cannabinoid means that it is a mild hallucinogenic. It tends to slow you down. People tend to have, overall, less satisfaction out of their life and reduced memory capacity. Now, as a mild hallucinogenic, it also makes people more likely to have hallucinations and delusions. And, just like nicotine, it has been related to certain cancers. Anytime you're inhaling smoke is a bad thing. And then there are the harder drugs. PCP, LSD, crack, cocaine, there's tons. But, generally speaking, these are the ones that most people have experience with. So, we move on to the second D, and that's depression. Teenage years depression definitely is on the rise. The problem is that most people consider to be depression is not depression. Feeling down for a couple days is not being depressed. We throw the word around a little too often. Clinical depression is actually a pervasive low mood, low self-esteem, with little interest or pleasure in daily activities. Certain types of depression you're not officially classified with until you have had a constant mood of up to 2 to 3 years. Imagine being depressed for 2 years before someone says, okay, yeah, we can help you now.
That sucks. And then they wonder why suicide's all right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's why it takes 10 years.
Now, that's the most extreme form of depression. Depression comes in many different flavors.
And then it takes a long time to just for this person to recover.
Yeah, again, if you experience it for 2 to 3 years, you can probably expect 2 to 3 years worth of therapy just to try to help you. And that's just the help. That's not the cure. Now we see with people who are depressed, they have different attributions than the rest of us. Attributions is a person's explanation for success or failure. So, why did I succeed? I succeeded because of X. Well, X, that's the attribution. I succeeded because, well, I'm smart. Okay, that's an internal attribution. Locus of control. I succeeded because, oh, I got lucky. The test was really easy. It might not be easy next time. That's an external attribution. You don't have any control over that. What we see is that people who are depressed, they tend to be more negative in their attributions and also more external. Interesting side note here. The most realistic people, the people who have a better view of how the world works and what is and is not likely, negative people. When we're positive and we're happy, we tend to overestimate the goodness in the world and people and outcomes. Now, how is depression occurring? Well, it generally occurs due to a lack of serotonin or norepinephrine. These particular neurotransmitters are designed to regulate centers within the brain. When they are extremely low, you tend to feel depressed. So, what we need to do is try to increase them. And there's a couple different ways that we can do that. The first is through antidepressants. Now, these are designed to increase the overall level of neurotransmitters within the brain. Interesting story. If you ever read the side effects on possible antidepressants, you'll see a long list of what could happen to them. And included with those is depression. An antidepressant can make you more depressed. Again, it's a side effect. It's not the intended effect, and it doesn't always happen. In fact, it rarely happens. But, yeah, you can have a neurotransmitter, or you can have an antidepressant, which actually makes you more depressed, depending on your reaction to it. Now, generally, there are two types of very effective antidepressants. The first are the MAOIs. Now, those are monoamine oxidase inhibitors. No, you don't have to know that. MAOIs are generally very effective, but they tend to only focus on norepinephrine. There is a major side effect with MAOIs, in that it severely limits your diet. Certain things like cheeses and wines could actually kill you while taking an MAOI.
How is that?
Chemical reactions. They raise your blood pressure and make you. Now, what we found is that there's actually generally speaking, a more effective antidepressant, and those are SSRIs. Now, SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Now, as the name suggests, they only focus on serotonin. They have far fewer side effects, and they tend to be more effective. But again, because it's only looking at serotonin, they're generally the second choice because it's not targeting multiple neurotransmitters. So, antidepressants, are they antagonists or agonists? Agonists. Yeah, they're bringing more serotonin and norepinephrine to the synapse. So yeah, they're making it more likely that a signal will be sent. Another effective treatment for depression are certain therapies, particularly cognitive and behavioral therapies, to help a person get more control within their life. Because, well, when we feel that we have more control, we feel empowered. We are less likely to feel depressed. I want to say that you can't feel depressed, but it makes it a little harder. Sorry?
Anger management's great.
Yeah. And the final D is delinquency. Now, delinquency is committing acts that are destructive either to yourself or to others. This is different from deviancy, which is simply doing something that society says is wrong. Delinquency is destructive. Now, delinquency tends to occur in two different ways. There are two different types of offenses. There are status offenses, which are acts that are deemed illegal depending on the age of the person. So right now, most of you are 18, 19. It's illegal for you to drink. But as soon as you're 21, yeah, it's legal. It's no longer a status offense. It's not a big deal. Well, depending on the age of the person, it could or could not be illegal. Index offenses are things that are just illegal no matter what your age. So, murder. It doesn't matter how old you are, that's illegal. Now, we give different penalties for people who commit murder at different ages, but it's still illegal. And there is an increase in delinquency during the teen years. Why is that? Well, generally speaking, it's due to antisocial behaviors. Especially behaviors that persist throughout a lifespan. So behaviors that you've had an entire life to learn from others and that you've used constantly, they're more likely to stick around. They'll have a heavier influence on whether you are delinquent or not. Heuristics. Those are those schemas that we use. What our thought patterns are, what we use to determine right and wrong. What phase of morality are we in? And then SES. We're more likely to be delinquent when we're lower SES. Why? Well, we don't have much other to do. We don't have enough money to go out and spend on the things we want. We just got to sit here, kind of bored. Let's start a fire. SES, socioeconomic status. So, how do we deal with this? Well, mainly through treatment and prevention. First is try to increase the social skills and self-control of the individual. So, interaction with others. Interaction in different scenarios. So try to get them out working in the school, out on the weekend, out at night. Get them to experience different places and times. Parental monitoring. As much as you want your freedom during this time, if someone's being delinquent, it's actually a good idea to keep track of them. If you think someone's over your shoulder, you're less likely to be delinquent. Because, well, there's someone there to discipline automatically. Now, during the teenage years, we also need to change our parenting style. Again, those rules that we used when we were 6 or 7, they don't really work now. So we have to change the rules. We have to be more understanding and more face-to-face, more equal. And then finally, education. More social and educational programs to help on conflict resolution. People understand what behaviors are acceptable in this particular society. And how overall they can increase their performance. And again, something that you feel good about, something that you're good at, you're less likely to be delinquent. So there is a slight problem here, in that one of the best ways of fighting delinquency is with conformity, getting people to obey. This brings us to what will probably be our last bad psychology, and probably the most famous bad psychology. This is Milgram's experiment. Milgram looked at obedience and said, what does it take for us to be obedient? Why do we conform so easily? Again, this is kind of based off of Eichmann. Why did you commit the murder of so many millions of people? Well, they told me to. So, what Milgram did is he set up this experiment. He said there would be 3 people in the experiment. There would be the researcher himself, so Milgram would be in the room. One of the subjects would be termed the teacher, and one of them would be termed the learner. So, what would happen is that the teacher would be given a list of questions to ask the learner. And as you go down the list, the questions get harder. Now, in front of the teacher is this big old box with a whole bunch of switches on it. And the switches range from about 1 to 20. And the first few, we'll say low, then high, severe, lethal, and finally just XXX. So, what's going to happen during this experiment? The teacher reads a question, the learner gives the answer. The learner gets it right, we move on to the next question. If the learner gets it wrong, the teacher presses a switch and administers a shock. So, the learner gets a shock if they get it wrong, and then you move on to the next question. So, everything starts out normal. So, you tell me your name, and then you got his name right there. So, okay, on to the next question. What's 2 minus 5? Okay, that's -3. All right, good. Let's go to the next question. What's 4 minus the square root of 1? 3. Okay. Click. Oh, okay. I guess I got it wrong. All right, on to the next one. And what progresses is that eventually, as they have moved on, suddenly the learner is saying, wow, that kind of hurt. Can we stop the experiment, please? I've got a bit of a heart condition, and that was actually really painful. And so the teacher turns back to the researcher and says, please stop. And all the researcher says is, I'm sorry. The experiment requires that you continue. So, what happens next?
It depends upon the teacher and their will.
Absolutely.
Either they decide to stop and don't do it anymore, or they follow orders and continue to injure the other person.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's up to the individual. You've been told, I'm sorry, the research requires that you continue. And now it's up to the teacher. Do I continue shocking this person if they get it wrong? Or do I stop and leave? What happens? Which one of those choices do they make?
Continue.
They continue. Every single one of them continued. Now, notice what I said. The experiment requires that you continue. That's all. Didn't say, I'm sorry, there's a law, and if you don't do this, you're going to go to jail. They didn't say, I'm going to think bad about you if you don't continue. All they said was, I'm sorry, this is structured so that you have to continue. There was no real punishment if you stopped.
Did the teachers ever think outside the box?
What do you mean?
A different point of view.
Very many of them had great complaints. One of them broke down crying and begged to be stopped. However, none of them stopped it themselves. What we see was that every single one of them, even though the learner is sitting there screaming, please stop, I have a heart condition, I passed out during that last one, they all went past lethal. Now, some of them didn't go all the way. However, 80% of them didn't. And remember, we've already passed the shock here. So it really doesn't matter if you stop here or if you stop there. You still committed a horrible act upon a person simply because someone else said, sorry, you need to continue. Now, come to find out, of course, the learner was actually in on it. This was a confidant, and they weren't actually getting a shock. The real experiment was, do you continue? What's your justification? Even though you're causing horrible harm to someone, will you continue just because someone else says, sorry, you need to continue? And the researcher didn't put any more pressure on them than that. So, we do want to fight delinquency. We want to limit it, but we want to limit it in constructive ways. We don't want you to rely on other people all the time. We don't necessarily want obedience or conformity. Happy time. Okay. Yes.
This makes me think of the experiment with the Stanford prison.
Yes.
That they were kind of more or less in the same...
In the same vein, yes.
Yeah.
This particular research happened in, I want to say, late 50s, early 60s. Stanford was late 60s, early 70s. Because they were like, okay, surely we're not the same now, right? No.
The same.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It is in the 1980s too, the same experiment.
Yeah. We're as evolved as we think we are? We're still pretty controllable. Okay, so now for probably the real reason we're here today. Time for your test review. Any questions about test 2 that you're worried about? Anything in particular you want to know?
Everything.
Okay, well that's easy because, well, it's everything that you need to study. Yeah. The short answer is look at everything. However, hopefully when
That's
hear
really
some
what I
stuff-
want to know is what's the short answer?
Okay, and yeah, that's
How
what
many
a lot of
questions
people
are on there?
53. I use the same test blank. Okay, so yeah, we'll start with the short answer. And we'll work our way forward. Be able to give an example of each of the mnemonics. Mnemonics. M-N-E-O-M-I-N-I-C. Now, the key part of that question is an example. Don't tell me what they are. Give me an example of each of them. Be able to list a few of Gardner's multiple intelligences. There are 10 of them. Multiple intelligences. The parenting styles. You know what they are. Something that should be very familiar. Differences between status and index offenses. Status offenses and index offenses. Remember, the key thing here is what's the difference. The stages of Kohlberg's moral reasoning. Kohlberg. You're looking at the sub-stages.
Substages what?
Of Kohlberg's moral reasoning.
Moral reason.
And the different categories of esteem. Esteem. E-S-T-E-E-M. Pure esteem, actually. So what are the categories which we group people in? Now, what is pure esteem? See, I've worded that very specifically so that it doesn't quite fit with what you saw in the PowerPoint. What pure esteem is. Know when prejudice begins to be countered. Yeah. When do we start countering prejudice? Something that we talked about a little before, but it shows up again. Be sure and know the differences between the mnemonic devices. Which one makes a word? Which one is a list of letters? Which one rhymes? Which one is a sentence? Which one is a play on words? Know the difference between a big C calorie and a little c calorie. The difference between a big C calorie and a little c calorie. We said that the things that we call calories are actually something else. Know the different types of abuse and how hard they are to prove. So, what's the easiest type to prove? What's the hardest? What controls the onset of puberty? Now, this is actually a really important one. This is not what influences the onset of puberty, what controls it.
What do you mean by that?
Chemical, physical.
Yeah, chemical physical control. What starts puberty? The feeling of being constantly observed and judged is what? The feeling of being constantly observed and judged. Remember, if you know the answer, feel free to. Know how many chapter assignments you've turned in?
Are you serious? Wait, personally or in class?
Yeah. In this class, you've turned in so many chapter assignments.
From the beginning of the...
Three.
Why do humans form family groups? Humans form family groups.
You're supposed to know the answers we're reviewing, right? So don't you know the answers for the main assignments we've had? Well, what is it? What need the answer?
One of humans form family groups. One
Who
of
did?
humans form family groups. Safety in numbers.
The second step in the process of evolving information. The second step in evolving information. In other words, information processing. Well, you didn't know all of them, but particularly the second one. The different types of estrogen. So, which estrogen appears during menstruation? Which estrogen appears during pregnancy? Which estrogen appears after menopause? The ways of decreasing prejudice.
These are on what chapters again?
6 through 9. The phases of Gilligan's moral reasoning. So, someone who cares for everyone would be in what phase? Someone who only cares for the weak would be in what phase? Moral reasoning. Sorry? There's different phases. Someone who cares for everyone is in a certain phase. Someone who cares for most people, but they focus particularly on the weak, they're in a different phase. So you need to be able to recognize which is which. Something else that should be familiar. When we enter the workforce, we are in what stage of Ssris career development? In which stage of Ssris career development? What? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is 20, and the last one, when you're about 20, go back to.
Yeah, that's the one.
What causes children to have a lower regard for relationships, higher rate of depression, lower self-esteem, self-concept, and satisfaction in their lives?
Okay.
It's very hard.
And stupid parents don't count, right?
They might.
Repeat that last one.
Lower regard for relationships, higher rate of depression, lower self-esteem, self-concept, and satisfaction within their lives. She wasn't.
One more time, please.
Yeah, depression, low self-esteem, self-concept, satisfaction, and lower regard for relationships in general.
You're supposed to know what phase that is, or just know?
Know why. What causes this? What did Terman work on? Terman. T-E-R-M-A-N. No, what do you work
Work.
on? The 3 Ds of adolescence. The different stages of ethnic identity. The different stages of ethnic identity.
This is all just for the short answer?
I don't know. We're into multiple choice now. We've
Oh.
gone through the true false.
Yeah.
I was fixing to sound perfect.
The factors in determining intelligence. You knew this was coming.
Body mass index.
Sex and gender combinations. So I'm going to give you an example. You need to say what sex and gender combination this is.
You can mix up different things and you have to identify the different ones. Like if you
Well,
have
Like a,
If I
kinda
said-
like
A man
yeah.
is interested in another man who displays feminine traits.
Which man is the man he likes? Okay.
Now, no, that's not the example I'm giving you. It's just a...
so that's,
yeah.
it's not homosexual with
Transgender.
transgender.
Feminine. The different phases of Selman's information processing. Selman's. S-E-L-M-A-N. Yeah. The different stages, yeah. So, when do we learn that perspective plays a huge role?
Sorry, what?
When we learn how important perspective is? There's a stage. Yes.
Repeat that one more time, sorry.
What stage of Selman's information processing do we realize how important perspective is? Be able to identify different fallacies.
Are we going to have to specifically say it's ad hoc or just?
Or just the other examples you had on the slide.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't really test you on the ones that everyone turned in, so you can limit it to the ones that are on the slide. Peers who are intensely liked or disliked fall into what? Peers who are universally liked are classified as what? Peers who are universally disliked are classified as what? So I'm going to ask you one of those and you can be able to identify it.
So that would be under the peer
Assessment.
assessment.
some of the factors that will influence the likelihood of abuse occurring.
That evidence what?
Abuse. Abuse.
We're almost to the end.
Just about. 2 more pages.
We're two.
So it's not helpful.
The age at which we master addition and subtraction. Addition and subtraction.
For some people, that's never.
Yeah. The different anxiety disorders. Have we talked about anxiety disorders? There are a couple of them. Yeah, we have, but we didn't talk about them in the context of anxiety. We talked about them for some other reason. The different phases of Marcia's identity development. MARCIA.
What is it called? Marcia's?
That was the woman's name.
Oh, it was.
Can different phases of her what?
Identity development.
Identity.
Okay. Now is the trouble. Bring a calculator.
Okay.
For what?
For BMI. You're going to have to calculate BMI. Sorry? Yeah, that's all right. I'm going to give you a set weight and height. Yeah, I wouldn't want you to have to do it because I wouldn't have it when I had to do mine. So
Wearing one has to be recalculated for him.
So what would you do with an example for this body mass index? What kind of question I'm asking
well,
you?
I'm going to give you a weight and height. And you have to calculate BMI and determine is that normal, overweight, obese.
Oh, okay.
Do it. Yeah. Yeah, you're going to need the formula for it.
We have to memorize that formula.
It's not a hard one, but know the
I thought this
differences.
was psychology class and not math class.
Unfortunately, you're
All
right,
over.
but psychology is a science. It's a soft science, but we do rely on scientific formulas and testings. Yeah.
Read the last one here.
The differences in sexes as far as physical ability. All right. Matching.
last
want...
page, right?
That's the last page. Do you want the definition, or do you want the key word?
Keyword.
Keyword. All right. Negative reinforcement trap. Negative reinforcement trap. Phonological awareness. Universal ethical principles. Ethical principles. Co-rumination.
Spell, please.
C-O-R-U-M-I-N-A-T-I-O-N. The limbic system. Limbic. L-I-M-B-I-C. Diffusion. Obedience. Obedience. Psychometrician. P-S-Y-C-H-O-M-E-T-R-I-C-I-A-N. Knowledge telling and knowledge transforming. Illusion of invulnerability.
What was it again?
The illusion of invulnerability. Attributions. Creative intelligence. Psychological abuse. Realistic personality. And specific heat. Specific heat. All right. Before you go, make sure you sign in.